9.
In the late 1st century, the island of Patmos was a remote, rocky outcrop in the Aegean Sea. This was the site of John's exile, a 1st century prisoner isolated for his testimony. While in this prison, John recorded a series of specific events he was told would occur during the final 7 years before a promised return. This text includes a unique promise, a blessing for anyone who simply reads, hears, and heeds the words of the prophecy. By beginning with this invitation, the text presents itself as a set of instructions intended for practical use. John describes a sudden interruption to his isolation, a loud voice, sounding like a trumpet, filling his shadowy cell on the Lord's Day. This voice issued a 3-part command. John was to write down what he had already seen, the things that were currently happening, and the events that would take place after them. This directive frames the writing as an official record. It is presented not as John's own speculation, but as a documented timeline dictated by a higher authority. It establishes an immediate sense of gravity, stating clearly that the time is near. This diagram illustrates the prologue's central prediction, a centralized one-world government. A timeline branches into a network representing total global integration. This regime controls daily life, monitoring and restricting access to food, commerce, medicine, and speech. Resistance to this global system results in severe state-sanctioned consequences. Dissidents are described as being jailed, enslaved, or hunted by the central authority. John identifies himself as a companion in the tribulation, a term referring to a period of intense distress. His position as a prisoner of Rome mirrors the endurance required of those facing the future global regime. To counter this terrestrial control, the text introduces a divine authority that supersedes all human governance, identifying Jesus Christ as the ruler over the kings of the earth. As John turns, he sees one like the Son of Man standing among 7 golden lampstands. The figure wears a garment reaching his feet and a golden band around his chest. These details signify the concurrent roles of a king and a priest. The description begins with the figure's head and hair, which are as white as wool or snow. This whiteness represents an ancient and eternal wisdom, a direct contrast to the shifting and flawed knowledge of human political systems. The eyes of the figure are described as a flame of fire. These fiery eyes signify a penetrating judgment that can see through the facades of earthly courts and state propaganda. The feet of the figure are described as fine brass refined in a furnace. Brass feet symbolize an unyielding justice, one capable of standing firm against the structures of the one-world government. And when he spoke, the sound was like the roar of many waters. Out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his entire countenance shone like the sun at its full strength. The impact of this sight was physical. John fell at the figure's feet as if he were dead, only to be revived when the figure laid a right hand on him and told him not to be afraid. The scale of this presence establishes the weight of the message. The authority of the instructions that follow rests on the nature of the figure delivering them. The figure identifies himself as the Alpha and the Omega. These are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet, signaling a claim to be present at both the beginning of time and its conclusion. The vision uses specific symbols that are immediately decoded. The 7 golden lampstands represent 7 historical churches that were active at the time. The 7 stars held in the figure's right hand are identified as the angels assigned to those same 7 churches. The figure then declares his status. I am he who lives, and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. This statement presents the resurrection as tangible proof of victory over mortality. The figure claims the keys of Hades and of death. Hades refers to the realm of the dead. This claim addresses the autocracy's primary weapon, the threat of execution for those who resist. Possessing these keys signifies that the figure holds jurisdiction over both biological life and the state of existence after death. This visualizes the failure of the autocracy's lethal power. A system built on the threat of death is shattering. It collapses when it faces an authority that has mastered the grave. By holding the keys to death, Christ removes the final leverage the global regime has over humanity. The text synthesizes 2 conflicting models, a predicted earthly kingdom defined by total suppression, and a divine kingdom characterized by liberation. By claiming authority over the grave itself, the figure addresses the one leverage point that human governments use to maintain total control. The narrative shifts to a future window, the final 7 years of earthly history, describing a one-world government that opposes traditional faith. This regime is described as a system that abolishes individual rights in favor of total state control. This control extends into the smallest details of life, what people are allowed to say, how they use medicine, and their ability to buy food or access money. By documenting these specific mechanisms, especially the control of basic necessities, the text provides a way for a reader to recognize these shifts as they begin to integrate into a society. Those who resist this system, including Jews and Christians, are described as being hunted, jailed, or killed by the regime. The earthly system relies on coercion, surveillance, and the removal of life-sustaining rights to hold its position for 7 years. In contrast, the Alpha and Omega represents a structural reality that precedes and outlasts the entirety of human history. The dense network of the earthly regime eventually collapses, as its temporary authority is overshadowed by the permanent sovereignty of the vision's initiator. The core tension of the text is resolved by showing that earthly subjugation is ultimately overridden by divine authority. Revelation chapter 1 functions as both a spiritual document and a highly specific geopolitical warning. The details regarding centralized control over basic needs were recorded to prepare the reader for a total shift in how global society functions. Tracing the logic of the text requires following the record from its first-century symbols up to its final global projections. The text contrasts this earthly pressure with the figure's promise of grace and peace for those who remain faithful to his testimony. It notes that while the power of a global dictator is limited by time, the reign of the Alpha and Omega is without an end. John's account concludes the world's end is determined not by a human government's reach, but by the one holding the keys to life itself.